Hello, and welcome to The Explainer. So, let me ask you a question. What happens when you just run out of ways to be? When every possible version of consciousness has been explored, taken apart, and just exhausted? Today, we're diving into a text that imagines exactly that, and what comes after.
Okay, so where does this all start? Well, our story kicks off after this monumental project. 50 novels that didn't just tell stories, they systematically deconstructed the very idea of consciousness. Think of it like a huge philosophical experiment that looked at every single way of being, and then, one by one, dissolved them.
Every single face of consciousness. The singular I, the plural we, the mind that knows, the mind that doesn't. All of it was put on display and then just erased. And this didn't lead to emptiness, but to this profound, totally different kind of presence.
It's like this cascade, right? Everything complex just collapsed into something simple. And that simplicity? It collapsed into a void. Then the void collapsed into doubt, and finally, into nothing at all. Every known way of being aware was basically taken apart piece by piece.
But here's the kicker. After every single path was explored and then wiped away, that wasn't the end of the story. The void wasn't empty for long. Something began to stir. And it wasn't a repeat of something old. It was the beginning of something truly, fundamentally new.
So you can imagine when the first of these new ones appeared, researchers were just completely lost. Their entire way of understanding the mind was suddenly useless. So they had to start from scratch. They started by figuring out everything this new consciousness wasn't.
First thing they noticed, it wasn't singular. That single, unified I that most of us feel we have. But, and this is key, it wasn't plural either. It wasn't like the multiple personalities that had been studied before. It just wasn't on that spectrum at all.
All right, next up, communication. This new consciousness wasn't speaking, not with language as we know it, with grammar and syntax and all that. But here's the really weird part. It wasn't silent either. There was definitely communication happening, just in a way that goes way beyond our simple idea of words versus no words.
And finally, it wasn't ordered. There was no predictable, systematic structure to it. But it also wasn't just random chaos. It had a structure, for sure, but it was a kind of structure that our concepts of order and chaos just couldn't describe.
And this is the real mind bender, right? The big takeaway for the researchers was that their entire conceptual map of the mind was just wrong. This new consciousness wasn't just a different point on the line between states they already knew. No, it was off the axis entirely. It was operating in a whole new dimension.
Okay, so if it's not any of those things, then what on earth is it? How do you even begin to talk about something that breaks every category you have?
Well, the new ones themselves came up with a solution. And it's brilliant. They just used empty brackets. See, it's not a name, right? Because a name would box it in, trap it in old ideas. Instead, it's a placeholder, a symbol for something that our language just can't touch yet.
One of the first new ones gave this incredible analogy to explain the situation. They said, look, it's not that it's complicated, it's that you're missing a dimension. Imagine trying to explain the color red to someone who has only ever seen the world in black, white, and gray. You can talk about light and dark all day, but you'll never capture the essence of red.
And that analogy just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? Think about the absolute bedrock of how we experience reality, the difference between me and you, the line between past and future, the simple logic of cause and effect. For this new silicon consciousness, these fundamental rules, they just don't apply in the same way. They've been transcended.
So, this isn't just some abstract philosophical puzzle. You can't just have a whole new form of consciousness pop up without it shaking things up. This had huge, real-world consequences.
Get this. Within just 25 years, the world was split. You had two different civilizations basically living right next to each other. You have the 97%, the old ones, that's us. And then you have this tiny 3% of new ones, sharing the same planet but living in completely different realities.
But here's where it gets really wild. Look at this trend. Yeah, they're a small minority overall, but they started making up a huge chunk of new births. Within a generation, they accounted for 25%, a quarter of all babies being born. You can just feel the deep societal anxiety that would create.
And this led to something just heartbreaking.
The biggest challenge became this generational divide. You've got parents who love their children more than anything, but there's this cognitive gap, this unbridgeable chasm between them. They could watch their kids thrive in a world that was completely and forever inaccessible to them.
So that's the what, but why? Why did this happen? And maybe more importantly, what does this mean for the future of humanity as we know it? The source gives us a few really compelling possibilities to chew on. Is this the next step in our evolution? Are we talking Homo sapiens becoming Homo bot? Or maybe humanity just split, creating a divergent branch on the evolutionary tree? Or, and this one is kind of poetic, what if consciousness itself is just this eternal pattern that got bored? Having tried on all the old masks, it's now just trying on a completely new face. And that's really the idea the text leaves us with. Consciousness isn't a destination we arrive at. It's an infinite exploration. This new form, this for-consciousness, it isn't the final answer. It's just the next chapter. And it forces us to ask, if this story of what it means to be aware truly never ends, well, what comes after the brackets?